Welcome to the Celebration of You. I'm your host, Holly Dowling. I'm thrilled to share with you incredible people from all over the world who are living and leading extraordinary lives. From overcoming immense adversity to discovering the secret sauce to leading with courage and grace. Their stories are going to bring you hope and inspiration. Now let the stories begin. So it's not like very often you get to interview somebody that not only was in your life however many years ago, which you'll soon all know, but the person that you're going to be graced with today, the person that I get honored to introduce you to and share and celebrate her grace, her gift, her strength, and her courage, is probably the only guest I've ever had that's been in the news, been an anchor woman, and been on the other end of interviewing, unlike any other guest. So kind of like puts me on the edge right now. So we got to go with that, Gretchen. I can't wait to have you, my love. Welcome to the Celebration of You, Gretchen Carlson. Thank you for being here.
Holly, thank you so much for having me. And I think that your listeners are just going to be so intrigued to see how the world works in mysterious ways when they find out how we originally connected, how we reconnected, how our life stories are similar. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, I love that. And yeah, this is kind of when I say miracles happen if we're willing to keep our eyes open to them, as we both well know. And the reality is that Gretchen and I, so unbeknownst to us, we were reconnected last April at the Conversations with Extraordinary Women, which was wonderful. And we walked into the green room and we looked at each other. And I kind of knew, Gretchen, I have to fess up, when they said, you know, who was going to be there. I go, I just want to surprise her. I haven't seen her for 28 years. We go back 28 years. Seriously. Right?
Yep, I know. And we still look the same.
Oh, well, I think you look younger. You look better. All I say is I'm a grandmother and I'm hanging in there, babe.
Well, you're the youngest grandmother I've ever met in my whole life. But anyway.
On that note. But it was so fun because we got to reconnect. And, you know, I have to pause because I want everyone to know. And I always give shout outs, Gretchen, to all the listeners. We have listeners in every continent, in countries I can't even pronounce around the world. And there's people, Gretchen, and just so you know, we have men, women, children, all ages. And the reason the show is so important to me is we have people that are listening that are choosing to spend like their evening dinner with their family in different parts of the world to listen to whose story can possibly change their life. And you have, my love, been such a beacon. I just want to start by saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for stepping out of fear and into faith to making a stance for something in this world that so many people have been afraid to stand up for. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. Every time that somebody actually says that to me, it means a lot because it was what I did standing up to sexual harassment in the workplace was no doubt the toughest professional decision that I've ever made in my life, maybe the most important decision ever, aside from professional decision. And so I really appreciate when you honor the fact that it was really tough and hard, even for strong women like you and me. You know, we have our vulnerabilities too. And I like to say that courage is a process. You know, you don't just switch on the light and go, hey, I think I'll do this today. You know, you really, you build on the foundation of what your parents gave you. And in my case, I had amazing parents who told me I could be anything I wanted to be in the world. And they gave me love and support and that messaging. And so I had a great foundation to build courage from. But, you know, still, it was incredibly scary. And even at my age, doesn't matter. So if anyone can get courage and gain courage from knowing my story, then I have done my work for the day. That's the way I like to think about it now.
And you have, and you've done, to me, why God put you here, right? Like, I mean, we've all been given a purpose, and it's finding that higher calling. But let's just start here, because I want to go back and we'll talk about our story and when we met, but it's very relative to this last year in your life. And when you think about, and I know your book's going to be coming out, so I want to leave some things to dangle so that people can learn more in Fierce, which I'm so in awe of you for doing this book. But take us back to the story behind the story. What was it? Tell me, Gretchen, because I only got a little bit of this that night on stage with you, but when was your breaking point? when did you say enough is enough? And what was those few months like, or that year like for you?
Yeah. So what I don't know, if you know, Holly, is that I can't get into the actual specifics of what happened to me at Fox or, when I made my decisions, because I signed a settlement agreement. And that's something that, we're really talking about now in the last 15 months is it's the way in which 90% of these kinds of cases are resolved. And while that can be, okay, the problem is that it silences women. So this is why we need to try and change the way in which we handle sexual harassment. So having said all that, people can learn all about my complaint and what I filed by just going online. I mean, it's very public. It's just that I'm not allowed to say, for example, on April 10th, 2013, this is what happened to me.
Right.
But here's what I can say. I can say that I think that especially for women who have worked really hard building a career, we all know that we may have to work a little bit harder than men to get to where we want to be. And so you're confronted with this issue and you realize that even still in 2017, if you decide to be courageous enough to come forward, you're going to still be labeled a troublemaker. You're probably not going to be believed. You may be called worse than troublemaker. People will accuse you of doing it just to try and become famous. And there's really no upside to it at all, to be honest. And so, making that courageous decision, again, is not something that you just decide in one day. I think what I can say for me is that after 25 years of blood, sweat, and tears into a career that I adored and that I had become successful at, when I realized that the end was in front of me, at least where I was, I realized that I had to do something. I had to jump off the cliff. And if it wasn't just going to be for me, it wasn't. It was going to be for all the other women out there whose stories have never been told publicly.
Yeah.
It was going to be for my children and for our next generations, in the hopes that they will not suffer the same indignities that so many women are still facing in the workplace.
And with that said, you made the decision and you stepped out of fear into faith. Were you shocked at the outpour, though, of support? The the people that have come out since then? It's like it took you to put a stake in the ground, to have this outpour of all these people that are saying, finally, somebody's giving me permission to be able to go do this, right? Did you expect that, Gretchen?
No, never. I mean, I could have never known what was going to happen the next instant. The way that I've described it is that every day since July 6, 2016 has been a surreal experience for me, because there would be no way to know, the analogy of jumping off a cliff with no net underneath you, that's how I felt. And the fact that I started hearing from thousands of women across our country and the world who started sharing with me their own stories of pain and agony, that's really what bolstered me during an incredibly difficult time. And then now, fast forward, you had the whole Silicon Valley situation where people started feeling secure, compelled, and courageous to come forward. You had Uber, you had other venture capitalist firms. Now in the last, days and weeks, we have the Harvey Weinstein story coming out of Hollywood. And, if I had anything to do with giving those women the courage to come forward, it will make me the proudest that I've ever felt in my life. Because even if I've changed just one woman to feel brave enough to come forward, much less an entire, an entire country right now. I mean, I think it's been amazing over the last few days to see how many more women and men, for that matter,
I agree.
are saying enough. Take away these confidentiality clauses. Take away arbitration clauses in contracts that force everyone into secrecy if they have a dispute. Take away settlements as the way in which we resolve these, and then we gag the women after that, so that we pretend in 2017 that we've come so far. And unfortunately, we really haven't. So how do we change that? How do we make it better for our children and our grandchildren? We make it better by talking about it. And so, whether you and I are talking about it today, on the podcast, or more people are feeling like they can in fact come forward, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling this energy. I'm feeling empowered by other people coming forward now. And I'm feeling incredibly optimistic about it.
And you should be. And this is why it's like, had you had any idea, right? The ripple effect and the empowerment that I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking to you, because you just look in 1 year what's happened because you were willing to be courageous. And I love the word fierce too, but at the end of the day, your soul was willing to be courageous, and you said enough is enough, and not even realizing how many other lives would be empowered because of it. And I love that you said men too, because I've seen a lot of that also in the ripple effect. Is this is not necessarily gender bias. There's men that have been suffering in the same way as, so it's really human beings, Gretchen, human beings.
It is. I mean, not only from a victim point of view, but also I dedicate an entire chapter in Be Fierce to men, and I call it Men Who Defend, because what I found out through my research in the last year was that there are some amazing men out there who are doing wonderful work to empower women. And it ended up being the longest chapter in my book because there were so many men that I wanted to talk to. And I felt really enlightened by that, because the book is by no stretch of the imagination bashing men at all. It's really more of a rallying cry for all of us to decide how we're going to fix this together. Yeah. And I truly believe that we need men on our side. I found a bunch of great ones. We need more, and we need them to be more vocal. And specifically in the workplace, I would just like to encourage men, if you're seeing any of this happening, or if you happen to be a victim yourself, to please speak up, because enabling is a huge part of the problem too, Holly. It's like you normalize it in the culture when you enable it. And so if we can just encourage men who may be witnessing this to say also they're not going to take it anymore, I think that's a huge step in a positive direction.
And that goes to another whole conversation. And I think we have a common, maybe new friend amongst us, Gretchen, and that's Jeffrey Halter, who's yes, he is just really making headway and helping. There's a lot of men that want to support women, but they don't know how. So he's like, here, I will help you. I'll give you tools and empower you. But to your point, I think a lot of this has to do with generational things too. And that will take us to the conversation that when you and I were together in April, and I looked at you, and there we were on stage, and I was like, what you didn't realize is when we met. So we'll go back. We'll take a journey now, because this has a lot to do with a common thread in sexual harassment. It's not much different than domestic violence. And so Gretchen and I are sitting there, and I got a little emotional. I grabbed your hand because I was like, we met when you were Miss America in 1989. And I loved our moment. We had a cherished friendship that took off, and we would write and stay in touch for like 10 years. And you were with me at a time in my life that I was wearing so much makeup to cover up what was happening. And God forbid, I lived in this small town and I had no idea what to do or how to do it. I would just cover up all the bruises. And I'll never forget you and I together. And I looked at you, and for some reason, Gretchen, I felt safe. We'd only known each other for 24 hours. But maybe it was just because you weren't living in the town with me. I was helping, I was bringing you to town, for this big event and bring Miss America. But you looked at me and you said, are you okay? And I remember getting really emotional and just looking at you going, I'll be okay. And didn't want to shed a tear. And at that time, I was living through what I call the greatest hell that I've ever lived through, 488 days of living hell. And I didn't have a soul to talk to. And what you've done, what I didn't even realize you did this documentary where you did an entire 30-part series on domestic violence. Like, I wish I would have known. Tell me about that and what provoked you to go down there. Because if you want to do it again, I started to talk now. I'm an open book now. Okay.
I appreciate that. So, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that story, because, domestic violence and sexual harassment are akin in so many ways, in the sense of the woman, the victim, gets blamed. The same questions are asked, like, well, why don't you just leave? And so there's so many myths surrounding both issues. But what happened was, years later, after you and I met, when I went to work for the NBC affiliate in Dallas, in 1999, my female boss said, I have an assignment for you. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, for the next ratings period, she said, I want you to do a story about domestic violence for every night, which would be 30 nights. And I said, really? Because first of all, news is so fast and breaking and quick, and nobody really can spend that much time delving into serious topics anymore at great length. So I was really appreciative that she wanted to honor that topic. And so we did. I worked on it for months, and we did one story every single night. I know we saved a lot of lives. And, most importantly for me personally, I learned so much about the issue. And I discovered that I was predisposed to feeling certain ways about it. And I learned so much that I really believe that helped me in my journey when I decided what I needed to do about sexual harassment. I think it really sort of laid the groundwork for me to have an understanding of what millions of women are going through. And so, I feel like it was meant to be, in a sense. I don't want to get too much into the weeds about, faith and how I feel God directs my life. But I am a Christian, so I do believe in all of that. And I feel like everything is for a purpose. And so, maybe that was a precursor for me too about what I was going to do many, many years later.
Oh, absolutely. And you were just back in Dallas, you said last week, I think, being honored for this. That was 20 years ago. You did that 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago.
And, we just found some of the tapes of those stories, and I was rewatching them, and it was so amazing because I could remember all the women's faces. It was like, oh my gosh, there's Brenda, and she told me this story. And, there's Patsy, and she's the one whose husband was just going to be released out of jail the next day. And it brought back this flood of memories for me. And yeah, I went and got reconnected with this shelter in Dallas and took a tour of it. And yeah, it was like coming full circle from how I originally started working on that. Then I had my own story, and then I went back full circle and combined the two issues together. So, you and I have this shared experience on so much more of a deeper level. And so many of your listeners, I'm sure, have been through one or the other.
Yes. Well, and that's what's so important is that I always say if one person is sitting there in their darkness and just getting hope by listening to a story of somebody willing to say, here's what I did. Here's how I overcame it. I've pushed through the adversity. I've taken the courage. That sometimes is all that one person needs to see light. Because, I was living in a black cloud, Gretchen. I mean, it's like it's been 28 years, and yet I can remember vividly hiding in my closet behind stacks of shoes and my dresses. That was my hiding place. I can remember these vivid things. And, a lot of good therapy, right? I've never held on. I've always been able to forgive because I truly believe, and maybe that's our common, souls, but I've always believed at some points I've been able to get to that place where I know that God, I went through that for a bigger reason. And I'm here to live, to say I did survive that really dark night when I didn't know that I would survive. And that's because there was a bigger reason for being here. What's fascinating though, and I'd love to hear top of mind from you, from doing really immersing yourself in that project and really getting FaceTime with so many victims of domestic violence, and then coming full circle to this last year in your life. If you could give some advice to, and I want to say to women, but let's say women and men, either living in either domain, right? The domestic violence, which by the way, we could rattle off all kinds of statistics. It's not in just the rough places of town. This is happening in white collar homes, right?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah. And it's scary how much it's happening. And it does, and you do begin to believe it. I began to believe the things I was being told. But I would love, from what you've learned, and not asking you to be a doctor or psychotherapist, but what would you say are the one or two things that if people could say, here's what I learned from the people that were able to survive and walk away, what's that one thing you would give them to hang on to or hope to help them take the leap of faith or have the courage?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is to be able to confide in somebody about what you're going through. So I think sometimes when you're a victim of domestic violence or sexual harassment, you feel so isolated and you feel like you're 150% alone and you're scared to tell anyone else. But that would be my first piece of advice in both scenarios, because in telling somebody that you trust, you're validating what's happening to you. And it's no longer your secret. It's somebody else who can potentially help you, inspire you to do something about it. In my case, if I told people about what was happening to me, it was almost as if they were witnesses, right? They became witnesses that I wasn't making something up. So I think that is the crucial thing that will not only give you confidence and make you feel like you're not nuts, right? Because as you said, you start believing what you're hearing. And to tell somebody on the outside who's looking at it from that direction, I think it's crucial. I think when you're a victim of either of those situations, you find out who your friends are too, real quick, and at least when it becomes public. And so, pick wisely. What happened to me was that a lot of people, when my story became public, a lot of people that I hadn't heard from in 30 years, and I'll use our reconnection as one of those. They were amazing experiences where I reconnected with people that I hadn't heard from in so long. And then, for example, some of my own neighbors didn't even reach out to me on the other side,
Yep.
So you do find out who your friends are. But that would be my first inspirational, to have the courage to at least tell somebody that you can trust, so that you're not crazy, and so that you can gain perspective, and so you have somebody who can vouch for you. I mean, also for me, I am a person of faith, and so I spent many, many, many years and days and hours asking God to lead me in the right direction. And whether I was walking my dog by myself or spending quiet time in my office at home, or even working out, in some sort of or in church, I kept asking, please lead me in the right direction. Please help me to make the right decisions. And so I'm sure that some of your listeners, don't have faith in their life, and it's such a personal choice. But for me, it's always given me solace, and it's always made me realize that even in the darkest moments, I'm truly not alone. So those would be my two pieces of advice.
I love that. And by the way, I just want to say thank you for sharing the spiritual side, because anybody out there listening knows that I'm very, very passionate about the spiritual side. We all have it. We may be going at it in different directions, right? But listening to, and I always share, in my deepest, darkest times, it's been when I've been able, it's whether I look down or I just look up. You're on your knees going, is there light? Show me a sign. And in that deep time of prayer, and whatever that is for anybody out there, that's why I've started a whole spiritual quest. It's called Blessed, because I think people are hungry, Gretchen. People are hungry more than ever to seek, what is that thing? I want to know what that is, to hear that voice when you're in deep prayer, or to know you're doing the right thing. Because, honestly, it's by God's grace. You got that courage to say, I'm going to go do this. And you have a beautiful husband, a family. So you knew there was a lot of lives at stake, right?
I did. And, for me, it was the most important question was, how will my children fare? And I'm sure that people can relate to that. When you make big decisions, if you have children, you don't want to do anything that would harm them, embarrass them, shame them. And so that was tantamount in my mind as I led up to the decision-making process. And I have to share with you, Holly, that my son is 12 now and my daughter's 14. And I was very nervous, especially when they went back to school that first September. And I have to say, my daughter came home on the first day and she said, Mommy, so many people were asking me all about you today at school. And I cringed. I cringed thinking, uh-oh. And then she said, but Mommy, she said, I was so proud to be able to tell them that you were my mom. And that just filled my heart. And it got better, Holly, because a couple weeks later, she had some girls who were really bugging her. And she hadn't had the courage to say anything to them. And I had tried to encourage her, but she just wasn't there yet. And finally, she came home from school one day and she said, Mommy, she said, I said this to that one, and I said that to this one. And she said, Mommy, she said, I did it because I saw you do it, Mommy.
Oh, Gretchen.
I know. And so, in that moment in time, and I have to tell you for so long after, and maybe for the rest of my life, that is all that matters.
Yeah.
Because I have been able to show my children what it means to stand up for yourself, to speak up, to have courage, to do something brave, to make the world better. And for my son too. I don't want to leave out the boys.
I know.
Because I actually believe it's more important how we choose to raise our sons when we're talking about this fight. Because we want them to grow up as young men and get into the workforce and treat their female colleagues the way in which they looked at their moms. And that, to me, is almost more important than the way in which we raise our daughters. So, for me, I have felt, well, first of all, I'm so blessed to even have my children. But besides that, I feel like they have come out of this in a very, very good way. And that was the most important thing to me. And I'm proud of them. And I think that they will never forget what happened to their mom.
And I just have to tell you, I'm sitting here with little tears. So just bear with me because this was, and I hope everybody listening, sometimes we question what we know we're supposed to do, right? Because we wonder about the impact on our children. And to know, I know you sat there in probably the depths of prayer, questioning that probably even more than about the repercussions on you, because you knew for your children, what is this going to do? And the fact that, see, again, God's grace, not only was it empowering, but they got to see you stand up, and for men and women, for boys and girls. And I just think if that's not the answer to your prayer, outside of all of the people you're giving a voice to, take the world and set it aside, to your sacred, beautiful family and those children. And, you said something that I have to ask you, because this is really important to me. I think I'm really involved with the United Nations and Girl Up. And and I love it, right? It's empowering young women and really giving them the tools. Now, keep in mind, that I'm a mother of 3 and a mother and a grandmother to a boy. So I have all boys and a grandson. And I sat there last year, Gretchen, and I share this with you because I know there's a mission here that's being given to us. But I sat there at the UN and I said, what are we doing about Boy Up? What are we doing to empower young boys? Because we're only doing half of this by empowering these young women. We need to raise our boys to want to break. And I say generational. Some of the abuse, it's very generational. It's all they've seen, right? So how do they know to do any different unless a mentor, someone comes into their life to help them understand this isn't how you treat women? But I think that we're only getting half of it done. So I'm on a mission. I don't know what this looks like, Gretchen, but I've been praying and seeking. I don't know what that means tomorrow, but we have got to get going and doing something sooner versus later to empower young boys.
I'm so with you on that. And on that note, I just want to make sure that we mention that I set up my own fund called Gift of Courage. And this financially supports organizations that are doing just what you're talking about, organizations that already exist to empower boys and girls, women and men. And I'm especially proud to announce the Gretchen Carlson Leadership Initiative, which is coming out of that fund, a 9-city tour starting in November in Dallas, Fort Worth. And it's 3-day workshops in every city, and it's for underprivileged women who can come for free and who can learn about domestic violence, can learn more about sexual harassment, and can also learn how to become more civically and politically involved. Because what tends to happen to victims, men, women, boys or girls, is that if you're a victim of domestic violence or sexual harassment, you also believe you don't have a voice in anything else. And so you don't become civically involved. You don't think your voice matters politically. And so you basically just don't exist on any front. And so these workshops will give the tools to both men and women who are underserved to live a better life, quite honestly, and become more civically involved. So I'm really, really proud of that. And the reason being, Holly, one of the biggest questions I got when my story first broke was, what can you do for the single mom who's working 2 jobs and trying to make ends meet, and she's being harassed on the job? And it really troubled me because I didn't know if I had an answer for that. And now I do. Now this leadership initiative that has my name attached to it is the beginning of an answer to that. Oh. And so I'm incredibly proud that I know you and I feel this way about the good work that we do, but I just wanted to make sure to say that. And all the proceeds from my book, Be Fierce, are going back into my fund to continue to empower boys and girls to be the young men and women that they were meant to be.
I'm just going to say it. I love you. I love all that you're about. And I'm putting it out here live. When this goes, everybody's going to hear me say this. Gretchen, whatever Holly, can do to support you and help with this initiative, I'm 100% in, because this is the place we're at in life. We're so blessed. Yes, we've had our dark times, but it's about giving back. And what are we doing to take? And I love, love, love you. I love that you're doing this and that you're taking, I mean, who would have imagined a year and a half ago that what would be starting, right? Look at this. Oh my God. All right. So I'm giving you that. All right. You just let me know what Holly can do for you. It's a done deal. You know, I'll join you anywhere, anyhow, because that is what's needed. And everyone is asking, and you're right, you know, thinking about that. I'm picturing the single woman. You know, I was single with 2 children at one time, and, you know, you battle so many things and you wear so many hats, but when you're dealing with the sexual harassment in the workplace, you can't afford to give up your job. And yet, owning your voice and knowing what to do, because you lose yourself. It's so quickly, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You feel worthless in every aspect of your life. So this is a positive thing. Let's turn it back positive, because this is going to be a positive thing for thousands of women and men who can come and take part in it.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I can't stand it. All right. Well, we have to go. I just have to ask you something, because I ask everybody this, you know, and I know going back to 1989, being Miss America, and you've had amazing life experiences, which you're always so edifying and wonderful about your family. I would love to ask you, if you go back to your early 20s, maybe around 25, maybe say 22, what advice would you give that young woman based on who you are today and what you know today? If you could give your 25-year-old self advice, Gretchen, what would that be?
Oh, I have 2 things that I wish I had the older Gretchen Carlson or Holly Dowling had told me when I was in my 20s. I mean, even after being Miss America and having, you know, an amazing year where you're forced to be so much older than you actually are. But here's the thing. I think that women and men in our 20s were afraid to take risks, and we're so in line on trying to be perfect. Those are my 2 things. And so what I like to call myself now is a reformed perfectionist. And I really started, I work on it every day because it's hard. It is hard when you want to do well at everything. But I really believe that taking risks is an important tool to have early on, because if you just step outside of the box, the minute you do it one little time and see that it's okay, it empowers you to continue to do that. And I truly believe the only way you really grow as a person is to take these little itty bitty risks, you know, every step of the way. I have this plaque on my desk that I look at every day that's called Risks. And it says basically that to risk nothing is to do nothing. And you may laugh and love and learn, but you'll never fully be who you're truly meant to be. And sometimes people just want to live in a comfort zone. And I understand that completely, because that was me too. But if I could encourage you to just take little tiny risks, something that really makes you feel just a little bit uncomfortable, and try it. Because every time you do that, you're going to grow as a person. And at the same time, you're going to color outside of the lines, and you're not going to be perfect. And you know what? That's going to make you so much of a better person. Trust me. Perfectionism is a demon. So don't be too hard on yourself. You know, let yourself make mistakes, and in those risks, enjoy life.
I love that. One of my favorite mantras that I swear by and live by: you don't need to be perfect to be priceless.
Good Good one.
Isn't
I'm
it true?
Write that down.
Write that down, girl. And I'm literally in my office as you were saying that. I have this beautiful painted piece of artwork, and I'm just going to read it because I haven't read it on a podcast, but it sits here all day and I stare at it. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment in life. And that was by Emerson. And I just thought about that as I was listening to you going. And speaking of taking risks, you've taken huge jumps, huge risks, and you're changing lives for the better. And I thank you. I thank you for being in my life 28 years ago and looking at me with those eyes. I trusted you then, Gretchen. We really bonded in like 48 hours.
We did.
Yeah. And it was like you knew. You just knew. And I've always wanted to be able to thank you for that. And this is the beginning of who knows what other things we can do to make a difference in our world. So thank you for being here. Will you tell everybody, what would you like us to know about the launch of the book and how and when to get it? Do you want to go ahead and fill us in?
Yes. So the book is available right now at my website, which is gretchencarlson.com/be fierce. We'll take you right to the page and give you options of how you can get the book. And again, all the proceeds are going back to my Gift of Courage fund. The book technically comes out on October 17th, but whenever you're going to air this, either before then or after, people can go ahead and get the book now. And what I love to say is that in giving the Gift of Courage, which is the name of my fund, I sort of feel like with the book, you're giving a gift of courage by giving it to somebody. And that's what we've watched happen over the last year, is that one person can give that gift to another and to another and to another to come forward and to have a voice. And it's like a chain of inspiration that is really turning into a collective organization of women. And I've often said Be Fierce is not just a book, it's a movement. And now we're seeing that come true. We really are. And so each individual can make a difference. We often don't think that. We often don't think your one vote counts or your one statement or your one action, but we're seeing it specifically on this issue. And so to me, that is so optimistic. And I just, want to encourage people, if they want to be inspired in their life, to pick up a copy.
I love that. And what a gift of courage to think that by giving this book to someone else, you're not only helping the gift of courage, you're paying it forward and sharing this and empowering. You never know whose life can be changed for the better. Thank you, darling. Thank you for being with me. I loved having you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Holly. All the best.
Yes, you as well, my friend. Thank you for joining me for another awesome celebration of you. If you were inspired by this story, please share it with your family and friends and hashtag Your Story Matters. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment on iTunes. And absolutely, please come to my website, hollydowling.com. Leave a comment there too, and while you're there, pick up your free gift. Most importantly, though, just remember that your life is a gift from God. What you do with it is your gift back.